All right, diving right into the world of data discovery today. And our guidebook for this trek is Scott Morgan's Pasted Text, specifically Chapter 9.
Yeah, we're going deep on data discovery.
And,
Yeah,
everyone throws around data is important, but we're going beyond the buzzwords here.
right. It's more than just a buzzword.
This is like before you launch that. Yes.
It really is. And it's interesting, though, this whole concept, like treating data with this much care, it's relatively new. Data discovery, what we know it as now, it's had a journey to get here.
Oh, so you're saying it wasn't always about like business keys and these metadata repositories and things. It's come a long way.
So what sparked this whole data revolution then?
Well, go back to the 60s, right? Businesses are starting to get the idea that, hey, data could be valuable, but they were so focused on just storing it all.
Just massive amounts of information, no real way to... No, just how to contain it. It's not really until the 70s, with the rise of these relational databases and SQL, that we start creating more structured ways to analyze it.
So I'm picturing like a giant warehouse full of potentially really valuable artifacts, but no system to actually go through and catalog and understand what you've got.
Exactly. But even then, it's the internet boom in the late 90s, early 2000s that really kicks things into overdrive. Suddenly, you have massive amounts of data being generated every second.
Yeah, the floodgates open.
Companies realize, wait, there are game-changing insights buried in all this, but we need to find them.
And that's where you see data mining, business intelligence, all these tools really take off.
Exactly. And that paved the way for the really sophisticated tools we have today. And they're important, these tools, especially as the data just keeps increasing.
Which I think leads perfectly into why data discovery matters. And even if you don't have data in your job title.
Right. It's not just for data scientists.
Scott Morgan makes this great point, compares it to building a house.
Yeah. Imagine pouring the foundation of your dream home, but you don't actually know anything about the soil composition or the lay of the land, even the materials available. You just start building. You might end up with cracks, or worse, a collapse.
Yeah, that's a terrifying thought for a homeowner. So essentially you're saying neglecting data discovery, it's like building a business on shaky ground.
Precisely. You set yourself up for budget problems, blown deadlines, and ultimately the project it doesn't meet the objective.
So we've said, okay, it's important, but what's actually happening when it's not happening? What's going wrong, and how's that impacting the final product?
I think the best way to describe it is you're navigating blind. Imagine trying to solve a complex puzzle, but you don't even know what the final image is supposed to be. You don't know how many pieces there are. You might get some sections put together.
Right, but you're never going to see the full picture.
You won't have that aha moment. And that lack of a clear picture, that's what leads to scope creep, right?
Scope creep, that's where the project just keeps growing larger and more expensive.
Yeah.
Because that initial understanding of the data was flawed.
Exactly. And thorough data discovery helps you avoid that because it gives you a really accurate understanding from the start.
Allows for accurate planning, realistic timelines.
Budgets are more on point.
And data quality, or the lack of
Yeah.
that plays a big role in this too, especially now with AI and machine learning becoming so prevalent.
Absolutely. Garbage in, garbage out. Right. If you're feeding bad data into a sophisticated algorithm, it's like giving a chef spoiled ingredients.
The final product isn't going to be great.
No, it won't be pretty. Data discovery ensures you're using the highest quality data possible.
Which is where I think about the data analysts and the data architects. They're the ones making sure we're not just collecting data, but that it's good, usable data.
Essential roles, and honestly, they're often overlooked.
Really.
It's true. Think about that house analogy again. You wouldn't build a house without an architect, without a surveyor to check the land.
But we do that all the time with data.
All the time with data projects.
So then you try to build like the data equivalent of a skyscraper on a foundation meant for a tiny home.
And the cracks are going to show. And in his book, Morgan gives that example of the healthcare system. They tried to roll out a new system, but no data architect was involved.
Wow.
What happens? Patient data is all over the place. Different systems, different formats, no way to really get a complete picture of a patient's history.
And that sounds like, that could have life or death consequences in a healthcare setting.
It's a recipe for disaster. That's why those data experts are non-negotiable. They look at the landscape, they see the pitfalls, and they build a strong data architecture that can support what you're trying to do.
So unsung heroes of the data world, making sure the foundation is strong enough for whatever we build on top of it.
Exactly. And that foundation needs a deep understanding of the data itself, which brings us to one of the biggest challenges in data discovery. Just getting the right data at the right time in a usable format, it can be a struggle.
Because, as we all know, data lives everywhere. Spreadsheets, databases. I bet there's someone out there still using sticky notes.
Oh, I'm sure of it. And trying to find what you need, it can feel like a maze with no map. And that's where the importance of metadata comes in.
Okay, metadata. So it's the map to our data maze.
Think of it that way, yeah.
Okay.
It's the guidebook to help you make sense of it all.
So we've been talking about metadata, this essential guidebook. How would you explain that to someone who's heard the term but doesn't really get why it matters?
Imagine walking into a library, right? But there are no titles on the spines, no authors, no Dewey Decimal System, nothing. Just rows and rows of books, blank spines. That's what working with data without good metadata is like.
Okay, yeah. Good luck finding anything in that library.
Exactly. Metadata is information about the data. So it's telling us where the data came from, what it represents, how it's structured, even how it relates to other data. It takes that raw data and makes it usable.
So it's like in our library, having those title cards, authors' names, subject classifications, all that stuff that helps us navigate this massive information.
Yes. And just like a well-organized library is essential for research, good metadata management is crucial for effective data discovery. It helps us find the data we need, understand it, make sure it's accurate and reliable.
And without it, we're basically just wandering through this data wasteland, hoping we trip over something useful.
Pretty much. And in today's world, that's not a recipe for success.
No.
More like a recipe for frustration and wasted resources.
So good metadata management, it's about creating order out of potential chaos.
It is. Creating a system where everything's labeled, categorized, and easily searchable makes finding the data you need when you need it so much easier.
And that makes me think about something else that Scott Morgan talks about in the book. It's that dedicated pre-project phase focused on data discovery. What are your thoughts on that approach?
I think it's crucial. It's moving from a reactive way of dealing with data, where we are constantly playing catch-up, to a proactive one, preventative healthcare, but for your data.
So not just finding data, but taking the time to understand it, how it's structured, what challenges might be there.
Exactly. And that pre-project phase, that's where your data analysts, your architects, your subject matter experts, they all come together.
They get to collaborate.
They can build a data inventory, they can assess data quality, design a data architecture that can support the entire project.
It's like laying a strong foundation before you even start building the house.
It seems like an extra step, but it will save you so many headaches down the road.
And money.
Oh, absolutely. Investing in data discovery up front, you're setting yourself up for success. You're going to reduce those costly delays, improve data quality, and ultimately you get more value from your data.
And speaking of extracting that value, let's get a little bit more technical. Let's talk about the business key searches and the hash values.
Let's do it.
These seem to be really important for figuring out how data gets processed, right?
They're the behind-the-scenes heroes, making sure data's flowing correctly, updates are happening when they should.
Okay.
To understand business keys, think back to that library analogy.
Okay.
Every book has its own ID number, right?
Like a Dewey Decimal number.
Exactly. That's a kind of business key, a unique identifier for that item. In data, it could be a customer ID, a product code, a transaction number, anything that uniquely identifies that record.
So it's like the data's fingerprint. It lets us tell one record from another.
Exactly. Now, new shipment of books arrives at the library. How do you know which books are brand new to the collection and which ones are just updated editions of what you've already got?
That's where the business key search comes in.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
We use that business key, like that unique book number, to look through our data and see, do we already have a record with this ID? If we do, it's an update. We just need to add the new info. But if we don't, that means it's a brand new record and we add it to the database.
So it's like a detective using a fingerprint to track down a suspect. It helps us figure out, is this an old friend or a new face in our data?
That's a great way to put it. And once we've spotted the updates, that's where our hash values step in.
Okay, remind me again, what is a hash value and how does that help us manage these updates? It still feels like magic to me.
Think of a hash function like a special machine. You feed it a piece of data, maybe it's a customer's address, a product description, anything, and it spits out a unique code. That code is the hash value. It's like a digital fingerprint specific to that piece of data.
And it changes, even if just one character in the original data is different.
It's that sensitive. So when we get new data, we run it through the same process. We get its hash value, and then we compare that new hash value to the one we've got on file. If they're the same, nothing's changed. But if they're different, even by one little character, we know something's been updated, and we update our records.
So it's like our early warning system. It tells us immediately if something's changed in the data.
And it does it all automatically. No more comparing every single detail by hand.
Wow. And that works even with millions of records.
Millions, billions. It's incredibly efficient and accurate. It's what lets us keep our data up to date and make sure that we're basing our decisions on the right information.
That is really amazing how much goes on behind the scenes that we never think about. But it's so crucial for keeping everything running smoothly.
Absolutely. It's a challenge, but tools like this, they help us manage that complexity and make sure we're not just drowning in data, but actually using it.
We're finding the gold nuggets.
Exactly. And to understand the flow of all this data, where it's coming from, where it's going, how it changes along the way, we use something called data flow diagrams, DFDs for short.
Okay. DFDs are those like flowcharts, but for data.
Yeah, a visual representation of how data moves through a system.
So instead of just talking about it abstractly, we can see its journey.
Exactly. And that visual is so helpful when you're dealing with these complex data processes. You can see potential bottlenecks. You can make sure data is handled securely and efficiently.
And Scott Morgan actually is a really great example of this in the book with that banking system illustration.
It's a perfect example. Even something as complicated as a banking system, a DFD can break it down visually, easy to understand. You see customer data flowing through different departments, from opening an account, making deposits, withdrawals, and you can see how that information is used and protected at each step.
It's like having X-ray vision into the organization. We can see where the information is, how they're using it. We can pinpoint areas for improvement.
Exactly. That's what makes DFDs so powerful for anyone who works with data. They help you see the big picture. You can see how data is driving decisions.
And that brings us to a really important point. Why this matters, not just for data scientists, but for everyone. It's easy to go down that rabbit hole of the technical stuff when you're talking about data discovery.
Yeah, it can get pretty in the weeds.
But it comes back to, why should anyone care? How does understanding my data lead to better things in the real world?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, we can talk about hash values and diagrams, but
Right.
if it doesn't equal a better product or a smoother process, then who cares?
Exactly. So give me the so what here. If I'm a CEO listening to this, why should I care about a good data discovery process?
Because think about it. In business today, data isn't just a side effect of what we do. It's the fuel.
Yeah, it's what makes things run.
It drives innovation.
We've struck oil, but now we need to know how to extract it, refine it, actually turn it into something useful.
And that's what data discovery does. Takes that raw data, turns it into something you can use to make decisions with.
So give me a concrete example. How does this play out?
Let's say you're launching a new product. In the old days, you might just go with your gut. What features to include, the price point, how to market it. But now, with the right data discovery, you can analyze customer data, see market trends, know what your competitors are doing, and get a much better picture of what your audience actually wants.
So no more guessing.
Informed decisions.
Data to back it up.
It can make or break a product launch.
Wow. But it's not just for products, right? What about like customer service?
Customer service, perfect example. Imagine handling thousands of customer interactions. Emails, phone calls, social media. Buried in all of that is gold.
You just have to find it.
You see their pain points, you see the common questions, maybe even some trends emerging. But without a way to analyze that data, you're missing it.
You might be aware of some surface stuff, but
You're not seeing the full picture. Data discovery lets you analyze those interactions, see the patterns, address customer needs before they become huge problems.
makes you more efficient, probably saves you money in the long run.
Customer satisfaction goes up. It really is a win-win. And you can apply that to anything: marketing, sales, operations.
Really, any area of business.
Data can change how we work, but we do need to address the things that hold data discovery back.
And Scott Morgan does a good job in the book of talking about those challenges. And one that stuck with me is how many companies just don't see it as a strategic thing. It's a one-time task, not an ongoing effort.
It's so common. They focus on the immediate need. We need data to answer this question right now, and they don't see the bigger picture.
It's a long game.
Yeah, they don't invest in the infrastructure, the people.
It's like trying to run a marathon with no training.
You might make it a little way, but you're going to burn out. We need to shift the thinking. Data discovery isn't a chore.
It's an investment.
It's vital.
So it's not checking a box, it's creating a culture where data is valuable. Insights are shared, people are learning.
And it starts from the top. Leaders have to support this, invest in the right tools, make it okay to experiment and make decisions based on the data.
So everyone, not just the data people, they understand the power of data and how to use it.
Because data is only as good as our ability to understand it. If we can't analyze it, use it, it doesn't matter how much we have.
It's not about having data, it's about knowing what to do with it.
And one thing that bridges that gap that we often overlook is documentation.
Documentation. Not always the most exciting thing to talk about.
But so crucial.
Right.
It's like leaving breadcrumbs for yourself or for whoever needs to understand this data later.
Because without it, you could have the most brilliant insights and
Gone.
gone.
It's like they never existed. Documentation gives you that context. What data do we have? Where'd it come from? How's it organized?
The map of our data landscape so anyone can follow it.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. Just clear explanations, data dictionaries, diagrams, even just a simple note that says, hey, this is what this data is, this is how it's structured.
Makes it easier for everyone, not just the experts, to use it.
Exactly. When data is accessible, understandable, then everyone can get involved in the discovery process.
They're all explorers now.
Charting new territories with data as our guide.
I love that. Well, I think we've done it. We've explored the history of data discovery, talked about its impact on everything, from making products to keeping customers happy. The takeaway for me is this isn't just a tech thing.
It's bigger than that.
It affects everything.
Our work, our lives, how we see the world, data is everywhere.
So next time you face a challenge, at work, at home, remember what we talked about today. Ask questions. Dig a little deeper.
Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty.
You never know what you might find. This has been great. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and we'll see you next time.